Good morning, and welcome to the second video on different meditation techniques. Kind of a summary of the last video and the purpose of the video reiterated are that there are many different types of meditation techniques. You can Google, you can go around, you can read books, and you'll see some people talk about meditation of the breath. Some people would talk about a mantra. Some people would talk about, looking at an object, a picture of a deity, a candle, and meditating. There are other techniques such as concentrating on the breath and bringing your mind back to the breath. Scanning the body, so on. I'm certainly not saying here that one type of meditation technique is stupid or anything like that. Rather, to discuss meditation in a way from maybe the basic principles in order to understand more or better the different types of meditation techniques. In the last video, went through some of the basics of how the Theravada Buddhism categorizes meditation and some of the texts it uses to describe meditation. Essentially, they categorize meditation into two parts, two groups. Concentration meditation and insight meditation. And again, these groups aren't necessarily entirely two separate things. Secondly, Buddha himself apparently never taught one particular meditation technique or any of these meditation techniques. He didn't give people mantras. He didn't ask them to meditate on a candle or any such thing. The three sutras, well, actually, we'll start off with two sutras which he came up with himself. The closest thing to describing meditation techniques would be the Satipatthana Sutra and the Anapanasati Sutra. The Satipatthana Sutra is translated as the foundations of mindfulness, and it says something, its text says things more like the monk sits. He observes the up and coming rising of a angry state of mind. He sees the rising of a angry state of mind, the climax of a angry state of mind, and he knows as that happens, this is the up and coming rising, this is the rising, this is the climax of an angry state of mind, and it all continues to seize the succession, up and coming succession of an angry state of mind and the succession of an angry state of mind. Also in the same text, it would say what I just mentioned would be the observations of the state of mind, mindfulness of the states of mind. And there's mindfulness of the body, which would be the monk sits ardent, observing. He sees the up and coming rising of an inhale, the rising of an inhale, inhaling, the ending of the inhale, and he knows when that's happening, this is the up and coming rising of an inhale, inhale, so on. The Anapanasati Sutta is mindfulness of the breath. The previous example I just gave about the breath, mindfulness of the physical body. The Anapanasati is probably more that part, expanding on that part of the sutra. Anapanasati Sutta is also sometimes called a concentration meditation, but it depends how you do it. the fundamental idea is that, well, Anapanasati Sutra, this type of meditation is that you watch the breath. You don't control the breath, but you keep your attention on the breath. And then when your mind goes away, you realize that it's gone away, you realize what you're doing, and you bring it back to the breath. That's the condensed version. Where Anapanasati is supposed to be an insight meditation is not the part where you're on the breath, but the part where you're away from the breath. I see my mind going away from the breath. I see it doing this, and I bring it back. Not with force and coercion, but with understanding and observation, perhaps. I don't want to get into those details right now. Those are really the two texts that Buddha came up with. A third one, which was not actually Buddha, but Buddha approved it, was the compassion meditations, the Metta Sutra, where you wish all beings to be well, happy, and peaceful, and free from suffering. So again, different types of meditation. How do you understand them? Well, first and foremost, the fundamentally important aspect of meditation is insight. You gain enlightenment from insight of your own perceptions. Obviously, your own perceptions, this requires a lot of solitude to observe your own perceptions, and this is, why monks take a lot of solitude. But this doesn't mean that it is antisocial at all. Obviously, when you understand your perception with your different way you perceive, you would interact with society differently. That you would, the way you perceive interaction with people, if you perceive it in a positive way, an enjoyable way, you'll obviously interact with them differently. So while there's a lot of solitude and observation involved, is also very practical, and it practically has a practical effect on the way you live your life. And insight then is gathered by, insight on your own perception is done by practicing mindfulness, where this is exactly what you're observing. In the example I gave, I see the up and coming rising of an angry state of mind. Or rather, there is the up and coming rising, the monk observes, I see the up and coming rising. I see it is rising, anger state of mind is rising and taking over. I see angry state of mind is rising and taking over. In this way, one is observing what's going on. Ultimately, this will do things like understanding selfish motivations. This is also helps one change their bad habits and control their reactions to things. Now, what is also fairly plain and obvious when doing this kind of meditation is that you can forget to observe and fall into a daydream, an angry story, an injustice you perceive, or an embarrassment, or avoid a certain feeling. You are then no longer applying bare attention and observing, but you are commenting, interacting, and indulging. Knowing this and realizing this and changing your attitude back to bare attention is then the appropriate thing to do. It's not very easy. This then brings in the concentration practices. Well, what concentration exactly is practicing putting your mind on one object and staying on that object. This then helps you, trains you, builds muscles, practice, and frankly good for you, to keep your mind, to give your mind something to do, to keep it from going off in these daydreams and stories and repetitive cycles. It gives you strength against that, and mostly it simply prevents you from doing that because you're giving it a task, you're giving your mind a job. This can also be healthy if somebody is unable to control going into their loop tape recording of the injustices or misery in their life. This type of practice then is very helpful for that. But the point is that, for example, looking at a candle doesn't provide any insight about yourself. You don't know what you're getting angry about. You don't know what you're ignoring. You don't know what you're indulging in. That is not contained in the candle. The candle is just a candle. There's no insight there. But again, when your mind goes away from the candle and then goes into cycles, and because you're meditating, you say, okay, I see I had fallen completely unawares into this cycle. These are the feelings in my body. This then is immediately insight. And repeatedly, after repeat, after repeat, after repeat, you start realizing more and more what you're doing. Should probably add one of the things about meditation posture at this point in this effort of breaking the mind habits, is that when you sit without leaning on something and you're sitting and trying to keep your back reasonably straight, it requires a very small amount of energy and a certain amount of discipline. And when you're really, when you're going into cycles of thinking about things which very much bother you, your body will kind of learn to give it less energy to that and more energy to keeping your posture up without leaning on something. You don't have to meditate with super fantastic straight back. Meditation is primarily a mind exercise, knowing what's going on in your mind. But another obvious thing is that when you spend hours and hours, weeks after week, hour daily for years and months, bad posture, you'll just hurt the back of your neck. And it's unpleasant, and so good posture is good for those obvious reasons. Those really are the basics. Perhaps one last thing to talk about is meditation on entities or meditations. There's a Tonlong meditation where you imagine sucking out black energy from someone, or inhaling it and exhaling it, and so on and so forth. I think essentially this kind of falls in the category of magic, mystical medicine work. Me personally, I do have some belief in that. You don't have to have a belief in that. The simple point is, though, that it's a phenomenological observation. It means that this is something you perceive. You can feel, your body can sense or perceive a certain, shall we say, cloudy something or the other. You can perceive it being removed. It is fine to, for example, in that case, consider it just positive thinking. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's probably effectively the same thing. But nevertheless, there is something perceived there, and the exercise of turning something from negative to positive probably has a beneficial effect. It won't regrow a limb, obviously, but it'll do what it'll do. And as a practitioner of mindfulness and observation, this is part of the world of things there is to observe. So then that really ends it. That's really the three major categories or aspects of concentration, of meditation. One is insight, one is concentration, and the other is this kind of, shall we say, positive thinking, magic, mystical aspect. Thank you very much. I will be continuing to make videos on other topics related to mysticism, self-practice, meditation, and insight. Thank you very much.